on today's StoryBeat.
Read as much as you can, even things that you don't like, but it's really important to be a reader. So many people want to be writers and they think they can just skip over that part to give a devoted study to literature in order to actually be a writer, and that you have to divorce your ego. You have to devote yourself to the craft of writing in order to make anything that's any good.
This is StoryBeat with Steve Cuden, a podcast for the creative mind. StoryBeat explores how masters of creativity develop and produce brilliant works that people everywhere love and admire. So join us as we discover how talented creators find success in the worlds of imagination and entertainment. Here now is your host, Steve Cuden.
Thanks for joining us on StoryBeat. We're coming to you from the Steel City, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My guest today, Christa Parravani, is the author of the best-selling books Her, a Memoir, and Loved and Wanted, a Memoir of Choice, Children, and Womanhood. Loved and Wanted is acclaimed for its take on curtailed maternal health care as it pertains to children, and its condemnation of the personal, financial, and emotional repercussions of curtailed access for women. Loved and Wanted was a New York Times editor's choice and one of Dwight Garner's favorite books of the year. Christa's best-selling book, Her, a Memoir, shares her journey through grief after the death of her identical twin sister, Cara. Her was an NPR critic's pick. Vanity Fair called her astonishing. Bookforum said Her invites obsessional reader behavior because Parravani has the ability to make life, even at its worst, feel magic-tinged and vital and lived all the way down to the bone. I've read Her and can tell you it's a most beautifully written and unnerving memoir. I was deeply moved by Christa's telling of her experiences in confronting Cara's challenged life and untimely death. Christa also happens to be married to one of my favorite StoryBeat guests, the extraordinary writer of Jarhead and other books, Tony Swafford. So for all those reasons and many more, it's a true honor for me to welcome to StoryBeat today the gifted writer, Christa Parravani. Christa, I'm so glad to have you join me on the show.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Well, me too. I'm truly looking forward to it. So let's go back in time just a little bit. Am I correct that you really started out more as a photographer than a writer?
Yes, I did. Although it's complicated, as the beginning of any art, endeavor is complicated. I actually started off as a writing in high school. I wrote. I wrote poetry. I won prizes. I was the editor of my high school literary magazine, the Alvordian. I studied creative writing in college. Also, I was studying poetry at Bard College and studied with John Ashbery and some really great poets. And I had an identical twin sister, as you know, from reading my book, and she was also a writer. She wrote fiction, and she also went to Bard College, and she sort of drew a line in the sand and said, "You will not be a writer if I am a writer," and that was it for me. So I started taking photographs, because there was a young man who approached me who was a photography student at Bard. They had an excellent photography program, and he was interested in photographing identical twins. So the beginning of my life as a photographer was because I was an identical twin, just like so many other things in my life.
But you'd been writing all along. It was something that was interesting to you.
I had been writing all along, and then I started taking photographs, and I was genuinely good at it.
Well, I've seen some of your work, and you're correct. You're genuinely good at it.
I loved it. And so I stopped writing and started taking photographs and had a very good career, actually. I went off and got an MFA from Columbia and was a professor of photography and exhibited all over the world. And then...
Are you still taking pictures?
I'm not anymore. You can only do so many things well.
I find, I'm not a professional photographer at all, but I've taken thousands of pictures now, mostly when I have my phone. I just pull the phone out and take a picture. So what do you think storytelling, your early work as a writer leading to being a photographer, what do you think storytelling informed your photography?
I think that my study as a photographer and also my life as a photographer, when you look at a photograph, you have to read it. And so you only have the information that's available to you in the photograph. And so you become a person who is able to visualize a story, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
The challenge of making a good photograph is because there is a limited amount of information. It's only inside of that box that you invite a reader to bring in the story outside of the box. And so therefore I was always thinking about that, in terms of my own work or, photo history. I've studied that extensively. And I approached photography from I don't know if do you know anything about photography, like photo history or anything?
A little bit.
Okay. So, like Bresson in his A
Yes.
Decisive Moment. Okay.
Edward Steichen.
Yes. Very basic. I really believe that writing is very similar to photography in that way, which is that you come at something in an intuitive way from your feeling, from yourself and all of the feeling and your id, and you invite that into the work. And as a photographer, you don't see what happens in front of you in that instant. You feel it and you know when to take the photograph. And it's all about instinct. And for me, writing is about instinct too. Obviously, it's about craft. And as I've gone on in my career, I can really write a sentence and I know my way around a story. But the impulse to start writing was the same impulse that I had when I made a photograph, which is just, an undeniable pulse in the body. So that is, those two things are tied together for me that way.
Well, there's no question for me that a really good photograph is in some way telling us a story, and that clearly writing can be visual. And in fact, your writing is very visual. I mean, do you think that when you're writing that you're trying to create mental pictures?
I don't know, actually. It's a really good question. I like that you asked me this because I'm not actually sure. Sometimes I think people assume that my writing is visual because they know that I'm a visual artist, but I don't know that I am a visual writer because it's the only writing that I know in terms of what comes out of me. So I don't know if I'm any more or less concerned with what's in a room or the way things look than anybody else. I just know who I am and what I invite there. Actually, now I'm going to back up and say that's not true. I'm really interested in tactility and texture and color and the way all of those things come together to make somebody feel something.
You do not write in an obtuse manner. You don't write in an esoteric manner. You write in a very clear manner that actually presents an image, a mental image. And that way, as the reader is reading, at least in my case, as I was reading, I could see a lot of what was there. Now, of course, I don't know what actually was there, but I'm getting some kind of an image from it. That to me is a very good sign that the writer is communicating in a way that is understandable to me.
Yeah. I think I'm glad that you noticed that. I think, being that Her is my first book also, that it's a beginning writer's toolbox to be able to utilize that, because you have what you have at that moment. And I was still learning about how to be a writer as I was writing that book. I mean, that book taught me how to write. And so I thought, okay, basic sentences, make sure that people understand where they are, what's in the room, and go from there. And so I did it that way because I knew that people would be able to connect with that. And it was better to do that than it was to try to be overly philosophical.
I think it was very obvious to me that you hadn't started to write when you were writing that book.
Well, yeah, but every piece of work teaches you how to write it.
Every single piece of work is unique. It's what we famously call the tyranny of the blank page or the tyranny of the blank screen. And we don't know what we're doing as we start. We have some idea.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's right. I mean, I was learning how to write that book. How's that?
Yeah.
I was learning how to be in that book, which was a very challenging book to be in for many reasons.
Well, sure. Do you think of yourself today primarily as a memoirist, a novelist, a journalist? What do you think of yourself as?
I'm a writer. Yeah, which is a perfectly good thing. I'm a writer, but I am also an artist. And I know a lot of writers say I'm an artist and you're making art, but yes, and you're making art when you're writing. But I really identify as a visual artist. Even though I don't make photographs anymore, it is an essential part of who I am. Like going to the museum for me is like going to church. It really is. Like visual art speaks to me in a way that nothing else does. So I'm a writer and I'm an artist, and in that order now. But yeah, I'm working on a novel. So I would say, writer for sure.
Well, that's excellent. I mean, you don't think of yourself as a photographer anymore, really, but that's a part of your existence.
It's a definite part of my existence. Yeah.
Absolutely. And by the way, it's interesting, though we don't think of writing as visual art, it kind of is if you think about it. You have to use your eyes. Unless you're listening to an audiobook, if you're actually reading something, it's a visual experience. It's translating into your brain maybe a little differently than a photograph would.
Yeah, I mean, an audiobook is even more visual in some ways, because when you're reading a book, you have your relationship with the sentence on the page. But when it's being read to you, you only have the world that you see as you hear the book.
True. Absolutely true. So who do you admire as a writer? Who are your writer heroes?
Oh my gosh, of course, Joan Didion is my writer hero. I really adore Joan Didion. Scott McClanahan, I don't know if you've read Scott McClanahan's book.
Don't know that name.
Scott McClanahan is a writer. He's probably my favorite living writer. If I'll send this to him, but he's amazing. He wrote a memoir it's a novel. It's an auto fiction. I don't know. You'd have to ask him. You should interview him. Called The Sarah Book, about his divorce, which is exquisitely funny and devastating and amazing. So Scott, for sure. The poetry of Robert Creeley. I love Robert Creeley. John Cheever is a writer that it's a mix of people that you might never guess. So.
You like to spread your wings. You're not stuck down one narrow aisle.
Oh, no. I read everything I can. I read everything that I can, and even things I hate. I am always have a book. I'm always reading something. But those writers speak to me really intimately.
You're an obsessive reader, which, is part of why you're a writer, I think.
Yeah, I'm an obsessive reader. I read to see how things work and to deconstruct them and to see why they don't work for me if they don't work, and to, really admire the things that do work. I'm never a jealous person. I don't hate somebody for writing something that I wish I wrote. Never.
Well, do you think that as you're reading all this stuff that you're trying to figure out how to do it like them? When you say do you back up and reread things in order to break them down?
Mm-hmm. I just to figure out the story. And I want to know, I'm interested in seeing how every single writer makes a story work. And,
do you think you write to understand yourself?
No, I think that I write to exercise the parts of myself that are too shy to be on display in any meaningful way in real life.
Isn't that interesting? So you're actually, I use this word cautiously, but you're exposing yourself on paper so that you don't have to expose yourself in front of other people.
I think so. Or because I think that not because I'm interested in that exposure as something that's like flamboyantly interesting or anything like that, just because I just feel like it's kind of a dare. And also it's a busy mind there in my head. And I feel like, well, there must be something in that if I'm covering it up. And so I like my characters to live there.
We're going to talk more about her in a moment, but her, we'll talk about it. I found for you to have written that was extraordinarily brave. And that you poured out something that in your life was, at least at the time, intensely private. And out it came into this written form. And it was like you're reading into your private experience. And I think that's very brave to do. I've never done anything like that. So, most of the work that I'm associated with is fiction, true fiction. And I suppose some of you as a writer, when you're writing fiction, comes out in it, but not as it was in a memoir.
Yes, and no. I mean, so the book I'm working on now, the main character in that book feels like a version of the person that I am, but not me at all. She's not well. But I do feel naked through her in a way that in memoir I never did.
That's interesting.
In memoir, you have to be careful. You have to obey the facts, and you have a structure, and that structure is the truth. and you have people that you have to honor who are still alive and those who are dead, and you need to be careful, because you don't want to inadvertently hurt someone. It's a multifaceted art form in that way. Fiction feels freer to me, and therefore I have the ability to tap into the part of me that is there and exposed in a way that in nonfiction I can't, because I have all of those other moving parts to consider.
Well, there's no question that fiction can be very freeing, but at the same time, I think it's inevitable that you're putting yourself in there somehow.
Yes. Oh, yes. Yes. Well, we'll see how that goes for me, and I believe you.
You won't even know you're doing it. It's just there. And then maybe in retrospect, you'll go, oh, that is me in there. But when you're writing it, you're writing I think this is how my process is, that you're writing a character that is not real, that you're trying to make feel real.
That's correct. In my case, in the book I'm working on right now, the character is a real person, and she is me. It's a piece of historical fiction in which I have used autofiction, and we're trading off me and.
Wow. Well, I can't wait to hear what that is. All right. So how do you sit down when you wrote Her, for example, and any of your books? How do you structure your books? Do you plan them out? Do you outline?
I outline. I don't know people. I don't understand people who don't outline. I don't understand it. I would be panicking if I didn't have an outline.
I agree with you. I've spoken to many authors on this show, many who don't outline, they just go. They have a notion and they go. And I don't know how you do it. I'm an outliner as well.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, with Her, because it was my first book, and I really, as nice as you are, was learning. So, I wrote that book. I started to write that book in an MFA program. So, and I was older. I was an older student at that point. I'd already gone to get an MFA, and I'd been a professor, and I quit my whole life because I couldn't handle my life, and went and decided that I was going to be a writer. A most practical decision, I might add. But I didn't have an outline for that book. Actually, I didn't, and it was like getting your tires stuck in mud, because that book deals with a very large period of lived life, and it has to deal with that in order for the reader to understand the what of it, really. But I knew that the book needed to be constructed of moments that, without them, the book wouldn't be as good. So I used moments rather than outlines, and I thought, okay, this, and I had that in front, and I wrote that per chapter. I used a happening as like the seed of the chapter.
You had a wealth of story already. It was your story. You knew all these things that had happened. You weren't creating them out of whole cloth.
No, I wasn't. I had a wealth of my own story, which was, the life that I had lived. And then I had, my identical twin sister, Cara, who died. And that is what the book is about. I had her story, and I felt I needed to tell it because she wanted desperately to be a writer and hadn't had the opportunity to tell her story. And she was a great writer, by the way. She really was. I had those two stories, and that's a lot of story for one book to hold.
Oh, it's huge. Oh, and absolutely huge. So Cara and you and other people in your real life become characters in your writing. Did you think of them as characters? Were you able to back yourself away and have a little bit of distance, or was that not possible? Were they already lived in for you in a way?
They were lived in for me, but I knew that nobody would know who they were unless I told them, because every reader comes to a page with no idea of a person, just, like you meet somebody in the supermarket, you don't know who they are. So I had to do that, like every writer does. But the thing is also, though, I think that it can be from a nonfiction writer, and I don't know if you've written nonfiction in this way like I have here, but you're working, even though you know people intimately and you know your characters intimately, you're working against yourself in a way, because the thing is, like, knowing somebody too well means leaving things out that are super important. Right? So you have to go back to the beginning and make sure that you put it out, and for the reader to understand, like, they're meeting someone and assuming things about, they're not assuming things about them, that since they've known them for 40 years or whatever.
Well, did you sit down and develop the characters of Cara, Christa, etc., or did you just, once you started to write, you knew what was the three dimensions of these characters.
I knew the dimensions of them. One part of the book is, the beginning of the book. And in the beginning of the book, I heavily use an alternating perspective, which is I, toggle between my perspective and my sister's perspective in the book using a lot of her writing. And that did a huge amount of work because it allows the reader to feel like they know her in a way that I can't say. If I said, this is who she is, it wouldn't be nearly as impactful as it would be if you heard it from her.
Mm-hmm.
It also, I wanted the reader to have the experience of missing her when she dies. So I utilized that as a tool so that the reader knows her. They know the version of her that she wished that she'd gotten to put into the world, and then took that away after she died. Cara appears in very little bursts after she dies in the book, but is there a lot in the beginning.
I mean, you can correct me if you think I'm wrong, but the book ultimately is your story, though you're telling Cara's story.
Oh, it's 1,000% my story. Yes, it's not her story. It's my book. But it is the story of my life with her. And we shared a life in so many ways, and therefore it is part of her story. So I don't know how to answer that question, or I don't even know how to address what you're saying, because I do. Yes, it's my story and my experience with her. But then again, she's free to tell the reader about her experience with me, which I did not edit. Really, I allowed her to have it. She hated me so much, and I allowed her to write that without saying, you can't say that thing about me. You can't do that.
You're saying this is after she's gone. She's telling you that you can't say that about me.
Well, so the book is constructed of my sister's writing. A lot of it is, I would give her in the italicized sections of the book. Those are her words. Those are what she had to say.
From a diary? From where did it come from?
Her MFA thesis at UMass Amherst. She had graduated and gotten an MFA in fiction, and she wrote autofiction. I photographed us together throughout the years, and every time I made a photograph, I gave her the photograph and she wrote about it. So I had that writing. The section of the book where she is raped in the woods, that's her account from her police report.
Wow.
So that's her.
I did not know that until you just told me. As I read it, I thought you were just retelling it out of research and so on. This is actual words.
That's her word. Those are her words. They're not my words. And the reason they sound not like my words is because they're hers. And also, though, when you have a book with two voices in it, they have to be very different in order to pull it off. And my sister was a younger writer. She didn't have time, so there's a lot of ways in which it's like every sentence is on warp speed and at the volume is 10, and it's really gut-wrenching and kind of great. Honestly, when I look at it, I'm like, oh, I love that about you, that you were able to say these things and not edit yourself. But in mine, I had to be restrained in order to work against her in that way. So,
do you think if she had been around to work on it further, she would have edited it?
Probably, I think so. But I don't know what would have happened with her. I have no idea. I don't know. Yes, I think she would have. I think she was writing and she'd gone through a horrible and traumatic experience at the beginning of what she believed to be her career and her entrance into the world of writing, into this, it's a great MFA program, and she was on drugs. Let's just be honest. So when a person is on drugs, they're not really editing themselves. I don't know if she got clean, and I don't know what would have happened. I don't know.
Well, that kind of writing when someone is either on some form of substance, be it alcohol or drugs or whatever, sometimes it works out really well, like in the case of a Hunter S. Thompson. And sometimes it does not. It winds up being very self-destructive. Did you then need to approach writing the book as if you were a journalist, where you had to take a step back, or did you come at it from an internal and emotional perspective?
I came at it from an internal emotional perspective, knowing that she would want me to have the experience with writing that I was having while I was writing the book. And also, I just, what I said earlier about feeling responsible for those people in my life and thinking about how they'll be perceived and who they are and giving them dignity. I had that. And I therefore, because I had that in mind, I just trusted that it would be okay. I didn't feel like I needed her permission. It didn't need to be journalism. It just needed to be an articulation of a lived experience that I had with her. I didn't have that. It was more like a art. I wanted to make art. I didn't want to make a document that felt like true with a capital T. It is true, but that wasn't my first priority.
Well, I think this is going back to what you said earlier about your background and experience in poetry. I think that the poetic nature of a writer is what shows up in this book. It's not written like a journalist. It's not written like a reporter. You could have written this like a reporter, and it would have been a far colder story. But this is a very internal story, and it's very emotional, which is why I asked that question. I wanted to hear whether you thought the same. And in fact, that's what I think you managed to do. Why it's so powerful is it feels like you're not being a reporter. You are telling it almost in a novelistic or poetic way.
It's a kind of reporting. How do I tell somebody what this crazy experience was like? And the only way to do it was to say, it felt like this.
Well, fiction and screenwriting in particular, but fiction is all about conflict. And there's the variety of conflicts, the way that you can deal with conflict in storytelling. And this story that you wrote is wall-to-wall conflict. Was that did you realize that as you were writing it, that it was full of conflict?
Oh my God, yes. Did I know how to handle conflict? I don't know. Yeah, I mean, there's too many conflicts in that book. There's like, how do I save your life? How do I, keep to being a faithful wife? How do I live? How do I, stay in my family? Yeah.
Well, there's two kinds of conflicts in play here. One is the actual conflict that actually happened at the moment that it happened versus you then as a writer retelling it. That's a second form of conflict. So as a writer, you have to then interpret it through your lens.
Well, yeah, of course.
The reader is not watching a movie of what you went through. The reader's reading what you have interpreted through your lens and written out. Does that sound crazy?
No, it's just what it is.
It is what it is. So
that's the limit of memoir.
So my question then, going back to the question, is, were you conscious of it? And the answer was yes. You were aware that you were writing this conflict-filled storytelling.
Yes, but the thing is, any memoir has a conflict, because you could say, well, how are they able to tell this story? Why should they be telling it? Like, from their point of view, like that. Anybody could have that.
Yes, but I've actually read a memoir or two that have almost no conflict in them. It's somebody just telling.
That's a problem.
Yes, it's a huge. That's why I'm bringing it up. It's a huge problem. If you have no conflict, it's not interesting. It's boring.
Not at all. No. I think I understand what you're saying. Yes, it's just that there was no way to invite myself to the page without that conflict, and I was fully aware of it. And not only was I aware of it, I embraced it.
There's no question. If anyone else is listening to this and they get your book and read it, you fully embraced it. It's all the way through, wall to wall. It's a tough story to read and get through from an emotional perspective. It's not simple emotionally. It's very complex. How long did it take to write the book from beginning to end?
I started writing this book as poetry.
It's poetry.
As poetry. I started writing it as poetry in a mental hospital.
Okay.
I did. I was in a mental hospital for a decent amount of time, and I started writing poems about my sister. And then it was my first sort of, I allowed myself to go back to writing after my sister died. I gave myself permission to do that. And also, I used to photograph with a giant heavy camera, a big 4x5, the kind that are just like as big as your head. And
right.
I was, after my sister died, unable to do that anymore because I was like 85 pounds. There was nothing left of me. I didn't have the ability to carry a camera through the woods and take pictures. I didn't. So I had lost that part of my life as a result of my grief. So as the person, I needed something. I wasn't able to leave taking photographs and have no art. That's just not who I am. So, I was in the mental hospital. I started writing about going crazy, about losing my sister, about having her visit me, about all of the things that happened. And I kept up with those poems. And then I applied for an MFA in poetry. And I got in to the very same MFA program that my sister got into. And I studied there with the great James Tate, and he was amazing. And then I quit that MFA program because I wanted to write a whole book. And that is how that happened.
Not a whole book of poetry.
No, I wanted to write a memoir. I knew that the poems couldn't contain the story. Like they had the feeling in them, but that wasn't good enough for me and for this project. I mean, it had so many virtues, of course, and poetry has so many virtues, but I wanted readers to understand, because there was not a book like this. There was no book that I could find that described what it's like to lose your identical twin. It's like the closest thing to dying yourself,
As I said earlier, you do not write, at least in this book, in an obtuse manner, but poetry can be obtuse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and in some ways it has to be, just by virtue of the way that it is. It's about what's not there as much as it's there. And I just really needed people to know this.
So obviously, as we've talked about, some of this came from Cara's writing. I assume some of it came from your own journaling or diary writing, or however you did it.
I mean, the whole book came from my own writing. I mean, I wrote it chapter by chapter in a very fiction forward kind of way. I got my second MFA in fiction. It was not a nonfiction writing program. And I wrote each chapter like, a person sits down to write a story, and each chapter is very story forward. And I mean, it is my book. It's not hers, but all the italicized sections for readers who want to pick it up and read it those are my sister's words. I mean, it's like an eighth of the book, probably. It's very small, but even that is not it's part of the experience of reading it to know that these two voices are having conversation with each other.
Did you go and do further research, like interview people that you talk about in the book? Did you do anything like that?
I did, actually. So I did. There are moments in this book in which my life as a visual artist presents itself, just in terms of thinking about performance art. Like, I went on dates with all of my sister's boyfriends, like knowing that I was going to write about them. I already knew that I was writing. So in the book, I talk about going on dates with my sister's boyfriends, but I was really only there to be able to write about it. I was like, well, what would happen if I did this?
Do you think any of the book is skewed by time, your memory of things?
I wrote the book I started writing the book. Cara died in 2006, and I started writing the book in 2009. And so it wasn't that long after she died that I started writing it. And then I published it in 2013, such a long time ago. But I don't think so. No, because I wrote it in the moment. It would be a very different book if I wrote it now, obviously. So I do feel like it's pretty true. And I never had a single person tell me that they felt like I'd misrepresented them or argued with the veracity of something that I'd written, ever.
How important do you think it is for a memoirist to be as accurate as possible?
I think it's very important because, and not for all the reasons that people might think, I think it's really important because when you lie to yourself, you're missing the whole emotional point of it. So anytime a memoirist says, oh, I'll just fudge it here, what really they should do is say, why am I trying to fudge it here? Like, the whole reason to be able to be accurate is because you're exploring that corner of your mind. It's not, if you're lying to yourself, that's not interesting, but also you're missing the thing that makes you lie. So I was constantly asking myself that question I was writing. I never let myself not go. If I wanted, there were plenty of, trust me, there were plenty of moments in that book that I wanted to just jump over.
Why? Because you knew it was going to be challenging for you emotionally to go through?
Yeah. And there's also things that you don't necessarily understand. But as a writer of nonfiction, memoir, good memoir, like it's part of your job to try to understand them, as like, and to ask yourself why they're hard and to do your best to figure it out. But even now, when people do ask me about this book a decent amount, which is crazy to me, being that I didn't even imagine publishing it, to be honest with you. It was never the endeavor.
So you were using it as a means to purge it out then?
I don't know. I don't know. It was an obsessive thing that I did. I wanted to be with the book, just like I wanted to be with my sister.
I see.
I didn't know what I wanted outside of that.
So there was no, as you were writing it, there was no intention, I'm going to find a publisher with this.
No,
That's interesting.
there wasn't. There wasn't. I mean, at a certain point when I realized that I had something, then I thought, okay, well, what do you do with this something? And actually it wasn't until I was almost finished with the book and I met my husband, and he was like, what are you going to do with this thing? What is this? That I did that. I mean, I never published a story. I never published an essay. I didn't go for a modern love. I didn't do any of those things.
Yeah, but you could have asked him the exact same question, couldn't you? I mean, he wrote Jarhead, which is a really tough book to get through.
Oh my God, sure. But the thing is that he went to the Iowa Writers Workshop where that was the whole conversation. I really kept myself, I was in poetry. Like, let's just think about that. It wasn't like he wrote poetry occasionally or when he was a younger man or whatever, but I was in a poetry program. Like this was, people were not getting giant book deals. This was not what was happening. It was about a dedication to a craft.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, then I published it. I'm not saying that I'm some sort of monk or something like that at all.
Well, I think that's a fine way to begin for any artist of any kind of art, is that you don't start out saying, oh, I'm going to sit down today and write something to make money with it. You sit down to write it because you're, I think, hopefully compelled to be to do something that has an artistic bent to it.
I mean, that's exactly right. And my husband was already a very well-known writer at that point. So, part of me is like, oh, well, what business do I have doing this? I'm an MFA student. And, I wrote about this character in the book. I was, with a man who was 20 years older than me, who was very well known. He won a MacArthur Genius Grant for being a writer. I didn't have any business being a writer. Like I really didn't. I knew writers. I was not one of them like that. I didn't imagine myself in that position is what I'm saying. I just wanted to know what happened if I wrote it.
You're saying what I find fascinating. You're saying something that is, I think, fundamental to every successful artist. And that is, you start out not being successful and not being famous and not known for your work. And everybody, I shouldn't say everybody, but I think a huge number of artists think this is not worth anything. Nobody's going to be interested in it. I'm just doing this for me. And that's what you did. And then it became something that had value to someone else, i.e. a publisher or whoever, the readers and so on. And that's the way art works, that you don't start out at the beginning of your artistic life thinking, I'm going to be successful with this. At least I think most don't.
I think that's true. I mean, the thing is, I think a lot of times, and it's hard, and I understand why it happens, and it probably happens to me now, career ambition gets in the way of really being able to invest yourself in what you're creatively interested in.
Agreed.
So there's a lot of ways in which not being in communion with that part of yourself is excellent for your work. And I would say that, like, I was raised that way too. I mean, I was raised by a woman who was a career waitress. Nobody in my family went to college, nothing. So therefore, when I got into college, a good one, and I decided I was going to be an English major, no one said, that's not a good idea. I was always thought, I'm dealing with nothing. I know what it's like to not have food in the house. What is the big deal about being an English major? Therefore, like, what is the big deal about just living on ramen noodles and writing this book?
Well, notoriously, English people don't go into becoming an English major thinking, wow, this is going to be an instant path to success and money. Nobody thinks that as an English major. English majors think, oh, maybe I'll be a writer or maybe I'll be a teacher. That's usually the two paths. So let's talk about the book in detail just a little bit. Your opening line is, I quote, I used to be an identical twin. I was Cara Parravani's twin. I forgot who I was after my sister died. That's how you open the book. That's extraordinary, I think. So when you say you forgot who you were after she died. Explain for the listener how you even begin there. How did you get to that?
Well, that I used to be a twin. I used to be an identical twin. That was the first line of the book that I ever wrote. I didn't edit it or anything. That was it. I was sitting in a cafe in Northampton, Massachusetts, and I sat down and I said, I'm going to start writing a book about my sister dying. And that was the first sentence. I, you start there at the barest moment of what it is. I mean, I used to be an identical twin. I mean, people still call me by my sister's name on a regular basis. And so it's part of who I am. It's that line to me, the divorce of that. I used to be this thing, which is foundationally and pivotally who I am. What does it mean to no longer be that thing? Also, people still say to me, like, well, you're still an identical twin, even though your sister is dead, because they can't handle it. But I say, well, no, I'm not actually, because she's not here. I don't have that experience in my life anymore. But I wanted to start the book on that sort of full emotional register, to boil it down to the bones of what that experience felt like. And also to tell the reader what they were about to experience, this who, what, when, where, why.
Well, I've never been a twin, so I don't know what that experience is like, but you ultimately are still you. You share lots with your twin, but you're not your twin. You're you. So that's part of it. And I think that expression at the very beginning is extremely powerful. What makes a twin identical?
Well, so it's just, it's a biological occurrence. There's one egg and it's fertilized, and splits in half. That is what makes an identical twin, is one set of DNA, and it splits into two separate people, and you're really the same person, genetically speaking. You share all of the same, DNA markers, basically. Fraternal twins are two separate people that grow together in the womb and are also close. I mean, if you think about that really intimate experience of sharing that space, there's, videos or, ultrasounds of twins holding hands, and you're never alone. There's never an occasion as a twin to have been alone. And so your experience as coming into the world as a human being, which generally is one that is a singular experience. I mean, everyone says that you live alone and you die alone. Well, not if you're a twin. I mean, you're born alone and you die alone. Not if you're twin. You're born with somebody else, and there is that. You're born competing for resources from the very moment that you are an idea in this world.
What an interesting way to put it. You are always competing for resources. It's certainly in the beginning, for sure.
For sure. I do think to address what you asked about the line in the book, like, I forgot who I was after my sister died. There's a reason, there's a narrative reason for that. And it's the engine of the book, really, and I said this, I wanted very much to be able to talk to people about what the experience of losing my sister was like, because I hadn't read anything like that. But one of the things about losing your identical twin that is incredibly deranging is that because you look exactly alike, you are genuinely hallucinating that this other person is on and in your body. I missed my sister so crazily that I really did not know the difference between her and me. And it caused me to be unable to know who I was anymore.
Was that true for you when she was alive, but not with you?
Absolutely not. We were very different people. I was Christa and she was Cara, and I was a photographer and she was the writer, and I was the sensible one and she was doing tarot cards and sleeping with a million men. Like, I had dogs and a family and a little house in the woods, and I did my job. All of the things, we were very different people. And always, even as little kids, I was emotional in a way that she wasn't. She was tough, outwardly tough. But then, those roles changed as we got older, but we were very different people. She was flashy and I was shy, and I knew all of those things about myself and I liked them. I didn't feel like I needed to incinerate those things about myself. I enjoyed them, but not after she died. It wasn't, I really, that version of myself was gone.
It just disappeared for you? Just went away?
Yeah, because I wanted her back. And the only way to get her back was she looked just like me. It was like, wait, this is obvious. This is the perfect making for a science fiction horror film. I know. It's like I miss somebody this much that, okay, well, I'm the bodysuit for them.
And you were seeing her in the mirror. You talk about the reflections in the mirror in the book.
I was seeing her in the mirror. I was looking at her and seeing her in the mirror. But a thing about the book is that structurally and craft wise, I wanted the reader to have the experiences they're following the narrator, me. And I thought of myself that way as a narrator. You have to divorce yourself from yourself when you're writing a book in that way. You have to move your character through the world and have them do things. And sure, it was me doing them, but you have to have a certain amount of control over them. I wanted the reader to feel that journey and feel that this character had changed. The book begins with the temperature way up like that, because by the time that it ends, you want to feel that you've seen the writer, the character through this moment.
We spoke earlier that you took lots of pictures of her. You also took pictures of the two of you together, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Did it wind up being revelatory to you when you were taking the pictures about the two of you? And then was it a different kind of revelatory thing when you saw them after she was gone?
Oh my gosh, yes. So it's a complicated thing because, and there's so much ground to cover here. My sister was, as you know, she was raped in the woods while she was in grad school, and it was a horrific rape, and she's very lucky that she survived that. I mean, she died, obviously, and by her own hand, pretty much, and because of that instance, absolutely. But a result of that was that she was afraid to leave the house. Understandably, she, the thing that happened to her, which is the thing that's supposed to never happen, which is that you're getting pulled behind the bushes by somebody, that happened. So my photographs of my sister were really genuinely a way to get her to leave the house. That's what they were. I had to take care of her. I was in graduate school. I was studying photography. I had to do my work. And I convinced her to leave the house, and I spent all my time with her, taking care of her. And she had, in the picture, I dressed us in these long coats, and I did that because she has her pajamas under there. She wouldn't get dressed. She was depressed. She wouldn't get dressed. She wouldn't brush her hair. I got her to put on some red lipstick. But the photographs became, it was, healing for her to be able to leave the house. But I wanted her to experience herself the way that I experienced her, which was beautiful. And, I wanted that in the book too. I wanted people to see that as much as she really bothered me, that she was exquisite. So the photographs for that were me, for me were that part. I wanted her to have that experience. But then also, as I started taking them, the way in which we stood together, you could see in the body language, all of the discomfort, all of the agony, all of the love, all of those things that are impossible to articulate were right there in front of me, and I could see them happening. And I of course I wanted to keep doing it because it was teaching me about my life, but it was teaching me about people,
So the event that plays out in quite a number of pages in the book of the rape and its aftermath, you said earlier that most of that was in her words entirely.
I found that. I mean, this is a crazy story. So I was writing the book. My sister has haunted me forever. Obviously, but I was writing the book, and I'd got to this point. Like I said, I was putting it together in instances. I knew this had to be here. I knew this had to be here. Well, of course, her being raped needed to be there. It was the thing that killed her and the thing that broke us apart. It really did. And I couldn't write it. One of the reasons that she felt so frustrated and angry with me, and she did feel angry with me, was because I didn't live that experience. I don't think she wanted me to live that experience, but it caused me to not understand her anymore. She felt alone in the world, and for that reason she was angry, and it's justified that she would be angry with me. I represented a version of herself that she no longer got to enjoy. I couldn't write that part of the book. And then I went to visit my mother. And I said to myself, I'm quitting this book. I've been putting 2 years into this. It's not happening. I can't write this pivotal thing. It's not happening. Oh, it's over. I've failed as an artist. It's done. This book, goodbye book. And then I went up into my sister's old room there, which I'd really not done very frequently because it creeped me out, and she died in there. And I sat on the foot of on the floor on the foot of her bed, and I dropped something. I don't even remember what it was. I think a pencil or something. I don't know what I was doing with the pencil, but I dropped it, and then I looked under the bed, and there was a giant Tupperware container under the bed that I had never seen. And I pulled it out and I opened it, and inside of it was one of those, marbled black and white notebooks, and it was that exact scene.
Wow. Did you say that in the book? Because you're telling me this.
No,
Yeah, that's so interesting. And it is very graphic and it's very detailed and it's painful to read. I mean, it's violent.
it's really violent and really painful. I will say that it was the only piece of the book that I collaborated with her directly. Whatever wasn't there, I put it in, and I allowed myself into that moment in her life, and I put it in third person because it's neither of us. I took the raw material for what she had, and I took what I had, and I made something to make a picture for the reader.
Had you heard the detail that you were now reading? She told you that prior, or were you reading it for the first time?
I mean, I sat through the trial, so I'd heard it all.
Mhm.
But not like that, not like that. I mean, in all the ways that she could tell me in her writing otherwise, yes, but not like that. There's a rawness to that telling.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but you then had to make it, what's the right word? You needed to make it publish worthy.
I had to make it publish worthy and outside of being a document for court. So it had to be a story. It had to have tension. It had to be longer. It had to have more interactions. But there are plenty of pieces of dialogue in there that she wrote. I don't even know what she wrote and I wrote, honestly, anymore, but it's hers primarily. And I went in there and made it what it is. How's that?
Yeah, well, I think that makes sense. But you had to, I'm sure when she wrote it, it wasn't ready for publication.
Oh, no, it wasn't. And it was probably half that length.
You contributed to the telling of the whole, but much of it was her in her words.
Yeah. And I allowed myself to sit inside of her mind and write it.
I think that's, again, what I said to you earlier. I think that what you did is very brave. It just is. Did you think you were being brave doing this as a writer?
No.
It was just something you needed to do.
It was something that I needed to do. I thought that anybody was brave. She was brave because she actually lived through that, and I didn't. I didn't think of myself as brave. I don't know. I thought of myself as I thought of all the things that people call memoirs, nasty things. I thought I'm a vulture. I'm a this. I'm a that. Brave was not on the list.
Really? You thought you were being a vulture because do you feel like you were taking her story?
Sometimes.
Well, I can understand that, but it was still your story all the way through.
It's still my story. It's also her story, and she didn't get to tell it. Imagine that, somebody that you love desperately wants to be able to be something, and they don't get it. They get it stolen from them, and you're left with it,
So I think that, how do I say this? That you're talking about is also a story.
Oh my gosh, yes. It's also a story, and it's one I'm really interested in. There are ways in which I think I'll always be telling that story, or I'm interested in. I don't know if you read the book Yellowface, but I loved that book. I adored that book for all of the reasons that we're talking about.
I have not read Yellowface.
Manuscript from a dead writer.
So you eventually meet. I mean, there's a whole lot of the book that we're not going to get to today, but you eventually meet Tony, Anthony Swofford, who wrote the great book Jarhead, that eventually became made into a very well-known movie. And of course, he's been on the show as well. Do you think that when you met him and he was already a successful memoirist, that encouraged you to further with it? Had you already published it before you met?
No, I had not published it, and it was almost written all the way through by the time that I met him. So he didn't encourage me either here nor there in terms of the writing of it. That's not to say that I was not aware of the way people do things or anything like that. It's just that he did encourage me. He said, it's time to try to think about getting an agent. I was like, what are you talking about? that.
So Tony actually helped you to take it to that next level.
I mean, in terms of getting the gumption up to submit it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I mean. He actually encouraged you to go to that next level where you might not have otherwise.
Yeah, I probably would have taken more time, and yes.
That's obviously quite valuable because sometimes, as we've spoken about artists before, this was your first book. You didn't really, it wasn't part of your business experience at that point. And so to have someone who actually had that experience give you that encouragement, that's that's a big plus.
It's a big plus. Yeah, it's a big plus. I also was I went to my MFA in fiction to specifically study with the writer Jane Ann Phillips, who was my dear friend. And, I was aware of what people do. She was with me from page one all the way through. So
That's nice. That's a
before
good.
there was Tony, I had that also.
I don't need to tell you, it's a lonely profession. You work alone. You're not, unless you are in a collaboration, which most people are not. It's a lonely profession. So it's nice to have that exterior encouragement.
Yeah, it's really nice. I do feel like Her is a special book in that way, and I do feel like an extension of everything that I'm interested in doing as I go along. It wasn't a lonely process because I was working with my sister. I had a person there.
That's very interesting.
I'm not a codependent person in any capacity, believe it or not. I'm not. I don't that makes me very uncomfortable. But she was there with me. I wasn't alone.
I don't get the impression that you're a codependent person. I get the impression that you.
People assume that about twins. Or, like I help people write memoirs. Like I take on memoir clients now to make extra money. And a lot of people are. I don't mean to say, please don't listen to me, people.
After everything we've just talked about, this is what I get, that you are very much you.
Mm-hmm.
After everything we've spoken about you being, so closely attached, you're very much your own entity.
Yeah, it's a good thing for a writer to be, I think.
You actually write in the book, quote, "As children, we'd fought over toys. As adults, we fought over memories and words."
Mm-hmm.
That's fantastic. And you fought over memories and words even after she was gone.
Oh my gosh, yes. Mm-hmm. Yes. I mean, one of the beautiful things about this book is, if I couldn't remember something, I always could go back to her writing and say, well, did she ever write about this? And what did she say happened? Because now I have someone to put this up against, So yeah, we did fight over those things. And sometimes I don't know which one of us had happened to. I really don't.
Because there's no doubt memory is fragile, and you may remember something and you're certain that's the way it was, and then you go and check the tape, as they say, or read the journal or whatever it is and find out, wait a minute, that's not quite the way I remembered it. And that's what makes memoirs very interesting, because they aren't always, I asked you the question about accuracy earlier, they aren't always 100% accurate. There's a little bit of stuff that goes on in the process of writing it so that it's worthy of being published.
1,000%. That's also point of view. You have to take it for what it is, because it's one person's version of a story. It's its own thing. It's not true or false. It is its own creature.
While we're moving along at quite length here on the show, which I love, this has just been so much fun to talk, but tell the listeners a little bit about Loved and Wanted, a memoir of choice, children, and womanhood. What's that all about?
Well, I had the experience of living in the state of West Virginia and becoming accidentally pregnant. That's just the way it is. And I was married and still married. We had 2 beautiful daughters, and I got accidentally pregnant after my husband's father had died, and the person who was the closest version of a father that I had died. They died in quick line. It was like 3 weeks apart, and I missed a lot of work to go to funerals and found myself pregnant, and there was no place to get an abortion in the state of West Virginia, and we couldn't afford to have it. But we have a third child. We have a beautiful son. But I wrote about curtailed reproductive health care and what it's like psychologically to be denied agency over your body, but more so our son. And this is the part, I love that we're talking about this after talking about Her, but the real catalyst for that book was that my son Keats was born on the anniversary of my sister's death.
Wow.
Yeah, this little boy who I love very much and who I wasn't sure that I could bring into this world was born on the same day as, the person who I told to leave my house died. And it caused a real crisis for me. I thought, oh my God, you're never done with a story, first of all. I thought I was finished with that story of her, but I wasn't, because that grief was still there, the fear that happened after I gave birth to my son, because he was really not doing well. He had serious complications when he was born. I thought, oh my God, I'm going to lose him just like I lost her. But I got a little better from that moment. It was incredibly traumatic, and I put 1 and 2 together, and I said, well, what happens to babies born in states that deny women reproductive health care? Well, it turns out they're dying at enormous rates. But the thing is, I wrote that memoir pre-Dobbs.
Oh, is that right?
Yes, my son was born in 2018. It was not a popular idea. My publisher was like, what are you thinking writing this book? Whoa, holy Moses. And I wrote it in 4 months.
So it was there and ready to go in your being.
I wrote an essay, and the essay went viral. The essay took me 9 months, and then I wrote the book in 4 months. I was given funds to write the book. I had, a bidding war, which every writer wants. And I sold the book because there wasn't a book like that one either yet. And it was a conversation that was brave. How's that? That was terrifying. That was terrifying.
So you were under serious pressure at that moment.
I was under serious emotional and professional pressure on that book.
Okay, so let me ask you what I ask tons of artists on this show. What do you do to handle the pressure? What did you do? How did you handle it?
I fell into the sentences of the book and did what I always do, which is I need to tell the story and to love the art of it and try to forget about the rest. And, for 4 months, my children didn't have a mother because I really legitimately couldn't get out of my chair. That is there was no book. I sold it on a proposal. There was no book in 4 months. So yeah. And, I just fell into the art of the book. And I actually think in a lot of ways that book is a superiorly written book to my first book by a lot. It really is, actually. But I published it during the pandemic. It came out in November of 2020. It shielded me from a lot of the ugliness that I think I would have had to endure had I been out in the world. And I was not prepared for that at all. I'm shy. I didn't want that. Yeah, the book itself was an extension of everything I love about writing, which was the sound of a sentence, building a scene, wry humor, being dark and funny, like all of the things that Her is. I mean, we've talked a lot about how the book is sad, but it's actually pretty funny.
Yeah, there's a lot of funny stuff in Her, for sure. It's a difficult, dark, sad understory, but there's a lot of humor in that book.
There's a lot of humor in that book and a lot of playfulness in that book. Loved and Wanted has all of those things in it too, as I allowed myself to have them, given such a difficult subject matter. And, kudos to my husband. I will say this, being married to a writer, having your wife write a book and say these things about a marriage, about finances, about all of that is incredibly difficult. And he just never said a word about it. He read it, and he read the last draft of it as it was going into galley, and he said it's extraordinary.
I can't think of a better person to have on your side in that case, because if you've read Jarhead, he's fearless in terms of writing about stuff.
Yeah, and also I'd married him. He's a grizzly Marine. He owed it to me. I mean, we put in 15 years together. So.
Well, I think that the fact that you had that 4 months to crank it out, I've always said there's nothing I like better and I'm more terrified by than a deadline. I love deadlines, and they're also really hard to deal with sometimes.
Deadlines are excellent in that way. Although I would say I don't recommend it. I do not recommend writing a book like that in 4 months with all of that pressure.
Well, okay, so you've never worked in Hollywood, right?
Oh, no, and I don't want to.
So if you do work, or if you know anyone that works in Hollywood, like I spent a long time working in Hollywood, it's nothing but deadlines, So you learn early on in a like a TV writing career like I had, that if you don't perform in that timely manner, you're not going to get paid, or you're not going to get hired again. So you learn how to cope with it, even though it's always, oh my God, how am I going to get through this? And somehow you do. That's the magic and the miracle of it, that you do. And that's what you did. You got through it.
I got through it. I think that it's better to spend more time writing a book and not less time. I think it would have been nice to have the extra time. I think that my body hurt from sitting in a chair that long. And I do think, I mean, I'm working on another book now, and it's been a while. And it's not because I'm lazy or don't want to write. It was so physically taxing and emotionally taxing to have to do that, that it's slowed me down. I needed time to recover. I really did. It was too much. It was very hard.
Sometimes a constriction makes you more creative because you're forced to, and that's time. Time is that constriction, and sometimes, like you say, it's so painful to get through that you have to recover from it somehow. Unless that's just you're just naturally gifted at getting through the physical part of it, which some people are and some people are not. Then you need that recovery time.
I was surprised that it's taken this long. I've just gotten back into loving writing again.
Oh, so when you finished it, did you fall out of loving writing?
I just was exhausted.
You just had enough.
I'd had enough. I was in love with reading, but also I just didn't have the feeling that I needed in order to make something. I felt like it had been killed.
When you were writing it under that time crunch, were you able to also read at the same time?
Yes. I was always reading, always writing. I was just a machine.
So you were reading other people's books. Were you reading stuff that was irrelevant to what you were writing?
Yes. Like the book, The Days of Abandonment, was really important to me during that time. For example, I read as many slim, fast-moving, page-turning novels as I could for that. I wanted to write a book that people couldn't put down about a subject that nobody wants to talk about. And I actually think I did that. So, I did that. I was reading books for that reason.
Well, I know you've been a little bit harsh on yourself in terms of her and thinking it's not as good, but I thought it was a page turner.
Oh, I'm glad. I'm glad. That's hard to do in a book that has so much.
Oh, my goodness. My goodness. I don't know how you did it. I think it's miraculous that you made it a page turner on such a very challenging subject all the way through. So, I've just been having just this most marvelous conversation with Christa Parravani, and we're going to wind the show down just a little bit. And in all of these experiences you've had as a writer, you've been a teacher for a while, and a mother and a wife and so on, and all your experiences, can you share with us a story that's either weird, quirky, offbeat, strange, or just plain funny?
Oh my goodness, 1,000%. 1,000%. I have a funny one, which is that on the day that my book was published, I had a photo exhibition of my photographs from, the series was called Kindred, that I took with my sister, and it was in a New York City gallery, and everyone from my publisher was there at this opening, and my mother was there, who's, a tough customer, and she approached the vice president of marketing and sales at Henry Holt and said, "So how many copies of her book has she sold?" And it was so mortifying and also hilarious.
That's such a mother thing to do, though, isn't it?
Yeah, it's such a mother thing to do. I wanted to just devour.
That's something my mom would have done. She would have gone up and said, how many copies have you sold? Did he give her an answer?
No, she was just like, I don't know. And then I thought, oh no, book is not going to be a bestseller. based on that reaction, I'm in trouble. Thanks, Mom.
But they stayed with you, didn't they?
I published my second book with them. Yeah, I'll probably go elsewhere next time because my editor is retired from the business. But yeah, I did. So yeah, there's that funny story, which is exactly descriptive of who my mother is. I have a great story about meeting my husband, which I've never tell. I think this might be the first time I've ever told this story, but it's a good one.
Oh, please do. Yes. I've got an exclusive.
You've got the exclusive. So in 2003, my sister went to rehab, and she had hit a real bottom. She was using heroin, hit a real bottom, and went to rehab in Arizona. And I was at her house cleaning up her house while she was in. It was March, I do believe, and she called me from rehab, and she said, "Christa, there's a reading group here at rehab, and we really need you to send me a book. could you please send me a book? And it's supposed to be a book that I feel like has something to do with my life. And I said, okay, fine. All right. I'd happened to be driving that weekend from New York City, where I lived, to her house in Massachusetts to clean her stuff while she was in rehab, and was listening to This American Life. And there was a guy on there talking about his time in the Gulf War and on Marine Corps bases. And I thought, oh, I want to read that book. That's interesting. But then I went to the library to pick out the book, and I saw that book on the carousel. And I picked it up and I thought, okay, well, we were raised on a Marine Corps base. We haven't discussed that here in the conversation, but I was raised by a Marine, which is not ideal, by the way. I was raised by a Marine, and my sister too, obviously. And I thought, okay, this book here, being in my stepfather was a combat veteran also. He was in Beirut. I sent my sister the book in the mail from the library, Florence Public Library in Northampton, Massachusetts. I sent it to her, and we never discussed it ever again. Okay. Never had a word about it ever. And then fast forward, I'm writing my book. And of course, I'm, the recipient of all things that belong to my sister. She had a vast collection of military history books because she was interested in writing about the military. And I was looking at her collection of books, and I saw, lo and behold, there was the copy of Jarhead that I sent her, and she had never returned it to the library.
Wow.
Of course she didn't. And it was checked out in my name. I thought, oh my God, I owe like $1 million to the public library in Florence. What am I going to do? But then I wanted to write about growing up on a Marine Corps base also in my book. And so I picked it up and started reading it, and I fell in love with the book. I was like, this book, everything in this book is speaking to me. He lost his brother. We were raised by very similar parents. We love this country in a way that, as a liberal writer, you don't encounter that often. There were all these ways in which our stories intersected. And I happened to be reading that at the exact same time that I was breaking up with my boyfriend, which is also weird. And I was like, hey, boyfriend, this book is amazing, right? Have you read this book? It's amazing. And he was like, yeah, I've heard it's amazing. And then we broke up. And then I was escaping the relationship, and I left New York City, where I lived with my boyfriend at the time. And I went upstate and visited a friend. And all this while I'm reading Tony's book, I'm thinking I should write him a letter. And I thought, no, that's weird. That's a sycophant, weird thing to do. I'm never doing that. No way. And then I got to my friend's house in upstate New York, and she's like, oh my God, I know this was supposed to be a girls' weekend. I'm so sorry, but I'm having dinner with the writer Anthony Swafford. Would you like to come?
Wow.
And I went.
Wow.
We were never apart ever again.
Wow. That is wild. That is the definition of synchronicity.
It really is.
That's a great story. That was Kismet. You were meant to meet.
For whatever reason, we were meant to meet. Yes. Yes.
That by itself is a movie.
Oh my God, that by itself is a movie. It is. I had so many thoughts about that too. Not about the movie, but
you'd have to work very hard to make that believable.
Yes. And that did really happen to me. And, there are ways in which my loss of my sister has followed that exact path of things like that, where she'll remind me every once in a while that she's still kicking around, and that would be it. But foundationally, when I think about that story, you think, well, she helped you find your husband and get into this life. But this is the reality. I chose that book.
That's pretty cool. I think that's just a fantastic story. Thank you for sharing that. So last question for you today, Christa. Along the way of this conversation, you have given us a huge amount of very valuable advice, but I'm wondering, do you have a single solid piece of advice or a tip that you like to give to those who are starting out as writers, or maybe they're in a little bit and trying to figure out how to get to that next level?
Read as much as you can, even things that you don't like. And I know I already said that, but it's really important to be a reader. So many people want to be writers and they think they can just skip over that part, especially like in the world of the internet and little sound bites and things. But you have to be a devoted study, to give a devoted study to literature in order to actually be a writer, for sure. And that you have to divorce your ego from the craft. You have to devote yourself to the craft of writing in order to make anything that's any good.
That's excellent. That is an excellent way to look at it. Christa Parravani, this has been an absolutely fantastic episode of StoryBeat today, and I can't thank you enough for your time and for your energy and all this great wisdom that you've shared.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you so much for having me.
And so we've come to the end of today's StoryBeat. If you like this episode, won't you please take a moment to give us a comment, rating, or review on whatever app or platform you're listening to. Your support helps us bring more great StoryBeat episodes to you. StoryBeat is available on all major podcast apps and platforms, including Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, and many others. Until next time, I'm Steve Cuden, and may all your stories be unforgettable.